very interesting. Mike, so you are thinking, in terms of like DreOS especially, you're thinking very holistically about every possible situation that a Dre operator needs to encounter, right? Of which D&D, managing that, managing pulls, managing empty returns, managing dual transactions, right, is a part of it, right? How does the kind of managing this D&D issue, whether for them or on behalf of their shipper, how do you sort of like think about that from the technology structure perspective?
Yeah, it's a good question, Eric. I think to start, everything is really stemming. Demurrage and per diem is stemming from a trucker's ability or inability to either pull or return a container in time, right? So when we're talking about this, let's start there and start on the demurrage side. When we're talking about demurrage, why is demurrage usually occurring? Demurrage is usually occurring, there's holds, container can't be picked up in time by the trucking company. So the first part is using technology. How do we prevent that from happening so it's unclear whose fault it was? So what I would say is proactive communication, like Alex was referring to, in terms of connectivity between a BCO, a forwarder, and their trucking company's key. Inside of DreOS, we have all the data points from vessel ETA, last free day, holds, all that stuff. All that visibility is very accessible now. It's living in the trucking company systems. But the merge is usually a result of a lack of capacity and a lack of forward, of really giving trucking companies the heads up and saying, hey, this container is being tendered to you on this day, not 12 hours before, not 24 hours before, not 48 hours before. So I think on the demurrage side, tech can help by just proactively communicating when loads are actually being tendered to the trucking companies. Can we tender loads earlier to trucking companies and allow them to proactively plan and allow them to properly allocate their resources internally, their assets, to pick up those containers. So that's really the way I view tech being able to solve demurrage from the trucking company's perspective. Proactively communicate or integrate with your trucking companies, tender loads to them earlier, or communicate when you know that loads will be tendered later on. Now on the per diem side, we're calling it detention on the trucking company world. Per diem. Yeah, I honestly didn't even know what detention was. I had to Google it. When we think of detention in the trucking world, we're thinking of wait time at like a delivery location.
Yeah. Yep.
So I might say per diem. I apologize. It's just
I'm sure.
I'm hardwired. But on the per diem side, I think the ability to understand why per diem is occurring is really important. Not only the audit trail is extremely important to be able to prove who's responsible for the per diem, but why is per diem actually occurring? And again, I go back to a lack of communication and integration in terms of saying, hey, I have a drop and hook account. I'm dropping at Mondelez in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. When is that empty? When's that container going to be emptied? Like 4 Kites, Mondelez in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. When's that container marked as empty? When are we predicting that container is going to be marked as empty? And is the return time that the trucking company is working with, the return time that the warehouse is working with, the return time that 4 Kites is working with, and also the return time that the BCO is working with the same? So when that data is siloed and people aren't really playing with the right information, the same information, things aren't being communicated, that's when per diem generally occurs, when it's not clear whose responsibility it is.
Do drayage providers have insight into what the BCO's terms are, per diem or demurrage? Is that conveyed to like your system?
Yeah, so on the demurrage side, typically we're working off of either a line last free day or a port last free day, depending on the market, depending on what data is being.
Those are the public tariffs?
No,
for that
no. In terms of the charges, yeah. In terms of the charges, trucking companies on the demurrage side, I would say right now, it's really leaning more towards the trucking companies are either carrying it for a day, or the BCOs are just paying the demurrage to get their containers out, because the trucking companies are in a position of leverage right now, right? Because the supply and demand's out of whack there. On the per diem side, most trucking companies are just going by their standard UIIA contracts, and if there's any extended time BCOs may be communicating that.
Yeah, because some BCOs with preferential, extra free time, right? That might diverge significantly, right? So
right, and I think that so for example, inside of our system, we have the ability to calculate when a container needs to be returned, either standard UIA or from a customer specific, delivery location specific, steamship line specific, and then automatically calculating based off of those contracts the amount so that those rates are automatically put back into the bill. And the trucking companies proactively know, hey, I have this amount I need to invoice out to that customer, and there's a sense of visibility. But I think tech solves it or progresses it by better communicating about the expectations of when containers need to be picked up and returned.